Chapter 60. Yi Qian's improvement could be described as godly. The more he taught her, the faster she absorbed. Principal Chen and Uncle Zhen had privately discussed this with each other many times. At the same time, they had more confidence in Yi Qian. Principal Chen opened up the foldable table and signaled for her to sit down. Under the scorching afternoon sun, he began to teach her sniping theory. There were too many things a sniper needed to learn. From learning how to move stealthily to setting up a firing position, from accurately reading a map to taking aerial photos of a battlefield. Even the ability to enter and exit a position while hiding were all things Yi Qian needed to learn. A year and a half in junior high was enough for Yi Qian to absorb all this knowledge that would benefit her for the rest of her life. Only shoot once. Remember, there must not be a second shot. Don't give the enemy a chance to find out where the bullet came from. You only need to shoot once and disappear after hitting the target. Then you'll win on the battlefield. The first shot is a matter of life and death. You need to observe the direction of the wind, the weather, and the visibility. If you shoot from a long distance, the wind speed and the bullet's gravity will change the bullet's trajectory. If you miss the first shot, the target will be alarmed and discover your presence at the same time. The second shot is very likely to be from the enemy's side. Accurately calculate the shooting range, wind speed, and bullet's trajectory. Then complete it based on your feelings. As Yi Qian listened to Principal Chen's teachings, her slender hand gently stroked the sniper rifle she borrowed from the army. Her oily face was solemn and cold. She had already begun to show the coldness that a sniper should have. At night, Uncle Zhen would take her to the army's armory to identify the guns, ammunition, and quickly assemble them. At the same time, she had to practice mixed martial arts with the soldiers in the army. In mixed martial arts, Yi Qian couldn't beat them due to her young age and lack of strength. For things like identifying guns and quickly assembling a gun from a pile of scattered parts, she needed about the same amount of time as the elite soldiers. The M16A3 assault rifle has the same appearance as the M16A4, but the biggest difference is that the biggest feature of this rifle is that it has made a big change to the mechanical sight of the immortality M16 series. So, Yi Qian waved the assembled M16A3 assault rifle in his hand and smiled at the soldier who was competing with him. So, I won. You're not holding an M16A3, but an M16A4 semi-automatic rifle. He raised his hand and aimed. The loaded M16A3 semi-automatic assault rifle fired the first bullet. With a bang, the bullet hit the red circle in the center of the target. The soldier who lost weighed the assault rifle in his hand as he watched Yi Qian, who was still a student, shoot the first bullet in a dashing manner. The recoil from the bullets did not affect her professional shooting posture, which was impeccable. He put down the gun in his hand. He was truly convinced of his loss. Even if he wasn't convinced, he had no choice. There was a round of applause. He smiled at Yi Qian and said, "I admit defeat. Unfortunately, you're not even 18 yet. Otherwise, we could still meet at the military tournament. I was opportunistic this time. Compared to you guys, I'm still far behind." Yi Qian's opportunistic remark was based on her own memory. The elite soldier in front of her had been able to accurately and quickly assemble a gun even while blindfolded. Chapter 61. At night, Yi Qian would run with the soldiers, assemble, and train their posture. At 5:30 in the morning, she would do morning exercises and mixed martial arts. Here, Yi Qian was like a real soldier, blending in with the troops. Yi Jian was like a role model when she came up to inspect the military posture and military etiquette. She made the veterans feel that they should work harder to succeed. She stood like a pine tree, sat like a bell, and walked like the wind. From her body, one could tell what the most standard military posture was and what the most qualified posture was. You're just short of a military uniform. After the morning training, the young soldier smiled at Yi Qian, who was the same age as his sister. He pointed at her uniform and said, "This uniform doesn't suit you." Yi Qian, who spoke and acted like a soldier, wearing a uniform, was indeed a little strange. Wearing a uniform that gave off the vibe of a military uniform, wasn't that strange? Yi Qian was still sweating. She wiped her sweat with her sleeve and said with a bright smile, "I promise to wear a military uniform when I'm 18. Her goal was to get into the military's Tsinghua University, the University of Science and Technology of China. It'll take another 4 years. After 4 years, we'll all be discharged." After the soldiers laughed, they felt a little sad. The troops were made of iron, but the soldiers were like water. After 4 years, the recruits here would have changed 4 rounds. Yiqian looked at them, her dark eyes shining like diamonds under the sunlight. She gently shook her head and said slowly, "No, in my heart, you're like the sun that never sets. You'll never be discharged. 10 years from now, in my memory, you'll still be wearing a military uniform. You'll still be indomitable men." Under the sunlight, her face was beautiful, and her voice was clear and melodious. Her voice and her smile were like the gurgling spring water in a mountain stream, flowing into the hearts of good men. "We're all looking forward to seeing you in a military uniform in 4 years. Come, let's give you a high five." The leader was a squad leader. They were all scouts who had trained in mixed martial arts. Their tanned faces were serious when they were on duty, but when they were resting, they were like the brothers next door taking care of Yiqian. In the sound of applause, Yi Jian ended her May Day holiday in the army. After the summer vacation, she would come back again and spend another unforgettable military life with this group of adorable and respectable soldiers. By the time they returned to town, it was already close to 5 in the afternoon. Principal Chen smiled as he took out a $50 bill and said to Yiqian, "Go, girl. Buy a caddy of pork belly and come back. Let's have a drink together tonight." His heart was filled with joy. He was even happier than if he had found a treasure. Yiqian took the money and said happily, "Braised pork, braised grass carp, they are all your and Grandpa's favorite dishes. You have a good memory. Hurry up and go." Uncle Jen also laughed out loud. He rarely came to town, but he was really happy today, so he agreed to come to town. The market in town was not big. By 4 or 5 in the afternoon, there were only a few stalls. When Yiqian was picking vegetables, she heard the stall owners talking about the mayor election. One of them said that Deputy Mayor Ye's family could even kick their own niece out of the house, so he was definitely not a good official. Yiqian's lips curled up when she heard that. If this matter affected his career, Yi Ying and her mother would not have an easy time. Chapter 62. At the front of the town street was a newly opened Spring Sun restaurant. A few girls wearing tank tops and miniskirts were greeting a few customers who had jumped out of a truck. Yi Jian, who was passing by the roadside, walked quickly to Headmaster Chen's house with the groceries she had bought. A bowl of red braised pork, a braised grass carp, a bowl of stir-fried bacon, a bowl of tomato soup, and a bowl of vegetables. Principal Chen and Uncle Jen chatted happily as they sipped on rice wine. After the meal, the two of them were a little drunk. Yiqian packed up his things, carried his backpack, and walked towards the recruit camp with a flashlight. The recruit assembly camp was about 10 miles away from Headmaster Chen's home. When they passed by the Spring Sun Hotel, several motorcycles came from the front. Yi Jian, who was holding a flashlight, turned off the lights subconsciously and saw the motorcycles stop at the entrance of the hotel after turning a corner. The strong lights of the motorcycles did not go off immediately. They reflected a blinding light on the restaurant's glass door. The night wind carried with it the pungent smell of diesel fuel and a faint smell of blood. Yiqian wrinkled his nose and walked away quickly. During the day, a few girls wearing tank tops came out to greet him. The people on the motorcycles all got off one by one. "Get out of my way!" A man shouted angrily and blocked one of the girls. He got off the motorcycle himself. "Send the food to my room and ask Liao Yu to come over." Yiqian's footsteps paused for a moment. When he lifted his feet again, he walked faster and more steadily. The smell of blood in the air had not faded. Yiqian did not continue walking forward. Instead, he took a shortcut to the recruit camp. When he passed by a village pond, he suddenly heard rapid breathing coming from under the embankment. Then there was the sound of splashing water, as if someone was climbing out of the pond. The muddy smell mixed with the strong smell of blood made Yiqian stop in his tracks. His body slowly crawled on the wet ground. The sound of splashing water disappeared, and the breathing became more rapid. Yi Jian pursed her lips even tighter. This person was injured. Was he a villager from the town? No, that was unlikely. If it was a villager, he could have called for help. She, who was used to being cautious, did not move. It was as if she blended into the night. She even held her breath. In the darkness, someone staggered as he stood up. Step by step, he walked towards the camp on the small mountain. The stench of blood became even heavier. When Yi Qian saw the shadow, he jumped up from the ground without any hesitation. He stuffed his flashlight into his bag and ran towards the stumbling shadow. I'll help you over there. Come, lean your body weight on me. I can support you. Yi Qian rushed over and grabbed the man's right arm and placed it on his shoulder. He used his other hand to support the man's strong waist. I know Commander Yang. Don't talk. Let's go back and treat your wounds. After being in the army for so long, he was familiar with the aura emitted by the shadow. It was the aura of a soldier who was calm in the face of death. Chapter 63. When he heard that the young lady knew Commander Yang, the man quietly put away his gun. When he spoke, his voice was already so weak that it was almost inaudible. Young lady, quickly run over and tell Commander Yang that the target has been alerted. We'll be there soon. Don't talk. Save some energy for when we see Commander Yang. Yi Jian's face was cold and gloomy. The 1.8-meter-tall soldier was leaning on her with all his weight. Her footsteps were also steady. Commander Yang was on the phone. When he heard the cold voice coming from the phone, his expression was unprecedentedly serious. Okay, I'll immediately send troops to search. Report as soon as there's any news. The target is the #1 overseas event in the southern province. Please be careful. A deep male voice came from the other end of the phone. It was filled with boundless killing intent. In 10 minutes, I'll arrive at Fujian town. Yi Qian appeared at the camp's sentry post. When the two soldiers on duty saw her, their expressions changed. One called Commander Yang to inform him, while the other ran into the camp with the injured man on his back. Inside, Commander Yang just happened to run out with the military doctor. He immediately placed the injured man on a stretcher. It's a gunshot wound on his left shoulder. He lost too much blood and fainted. The wound may be infected. It needs immediate anti-inflammatory treatment. When Yi Qian saw Commander Yang, she immediately told him all the details she knew. There's a problem with the Spring Sun restaurant. 5 foreign men came to the restaurant. One of the foreign men spoke with a Hongkou accent. He's injured. Hongkou accent. Isn't this? Commander Yang looked deeply at Yi Qian and said in a low voice, Young lady, you might have to work hard tonight. Go back to the dormitory first. The military doctor will come and treat this soldier's wound. Yi Qian slightly narrowed her eyes and said in a low voice, Uncle Yang, you only have one military doctor here? I'm afraid one isn't enough. I know a little about how to treat gunshot wounds. Let me go with you. When this young lady spoke, her expression and words always gave people an inexplicable sense of confidence. Commander Yang nodded without hesitation. Okay, you can help. Yi Qian had been in the medical school for more than a year, and his professional knowledge was even better than the medical students. How could he really just be an assistant? But it was true that he could only be an assistant. The 14-year-old Yi Qian had never been exposed to gunshot wounds before. He had only learned some theoretical knowledge in the army. Anti-inflammation, intravenous drip, wound cleaning, removing the bullet and cleaning the wound again. As long as the military doctor needed anything, she would immediately hand it over. She would even use a disinfectant cloth to wipe the sweat of the military doctor who was removing the bullet. When Xia Jinyuan came in, he saw a slender figure standing by the operating table like a sentinel. When she heard his footsteps, she turned around with a scalpel in her hand and looked at him coldly. It's me, Xia Jinyuan, he said in a low voice and took off his combat helmet, revealing his handsome face. He was wearing an army combat uniform. He did not have the elegance he had when he was in the military uniform. Instead, he walked in with the cold air of the dark night, filling the infirmary with the murderous aura of a powerful army. Yi Qian let out a sigh of relief. So it was him. The military doctor was doing a thorough debridement of the devitalized tissue in the contusion area of the wounded soldier's shoulder. Without looking up, he said to Yi Qian, "Left camera, prepare the one-time pulse debridement and rinse device." Yi Qian, who only met his gaze, immediately passed the left camera to the military doctor. At the same time, he prepared the one-time pulse debridement and rinse device. After the bullet was removed, he would immediately rinse the wound to prevent anaerobic infection. Chapter 64. Xia Jinyuan took a look and immediately retreated. He said coldly to Battalion Commander Yang, "The situation is stable for now. Tell me about the situation here." Miss Jian saw the suspicious target at the Spring Sun Hotel at the entrance of the town. He spoke with a Hongkou accent and was injured. Battalion Commander Yang quickly relayed the information he received. "We'll have to wait for the patient to wake up before we know the details." Turning back, his deep eyes glanced at the infirmary with the operating lights on. His thin lips pressed tightly together as he said in a deep voice, "When did she learn how to deal with gunshot wounds?" Her movements were quite skillful, as if she often dealt with gunshot wounds. "Captain Xia, you're talking about Miss Jian, right? She's smart and has a good memory. She's been in the army recently, so she probably learned a thing or two." Battalion Commander Yang was afraid that Captain Xia, who had a cold and powerful aura, would be displeased, so he immediately said, "The military doctor said she's fine. She was only allowed to go on the operating table because she knew all the medical equipment." Xia Jinyuan looked at the nervous Battalion Commander Yang and smiled. She's indeed a smart girl. The time on his watch was already 8:37 p.m. He put on his combat helmet and fastened his safety belt. He said to Battalion Commander Yang, "Increase the security in the camp tonight. Don't let that girl escape." "If I don't escape, do you know what those people look like?" Yi Qian walked out of the infirmary and removed his mask. He smiled faintly at the tall figure who had already walked into the night. "Of course, if you knew what they looked like, I wouldn't have to run out." Why did this girl, ever since he had tested her in school, she had been treating him like a little hedgehog? Xia Jinyuan turned around again and smiled at the girl who looked like a little hedgehog. His lips curled into a beautiful arc. "Little girl, can you tell me? Height, appearance, characteristics, we need to know all of them." He had to go along with her. She was a girl who cared about her reputation. As a man, it was gentlemanly of him to go along with her. Yi Qian, who wasn't targeting him, ignored his gentlemanly behavior and said to Battalion Commander Yang, "Uncle Yang, please wait for a moment. I'll be there in 5 minutes." After saying that, she ran towards the dormitory where she slept. Yi Qian turned on the light, laid out the paper, and picked up a pencil. He closed his eyes slightly and recalled the scene at the entrance of the restaurant around 8 o'clock. Speeding motorcycles, glaring headlights, smiling waitresses, gloomy men, and that heavily accented, "Get lost." The memories in his mind froze on the faces of the 5 people, and he began to draw on his homework with the pencil. Yi Qian had drawn her face, facial features, and even her hairstyle. Her drawing speed was very fast. There was not a trace of stagnation in her drawing, nor was there any sign that she needed to erase and redraw. In 2 minutes, she had already drawn a picture. A pair of slender hands quietly took away the finished sketch for her. The owner of the hands just picked it up and looked at it carefully without disturbing Yi Qian. Xia Jinyuan's dark eyes, which were as deep as the sea, lowered slightly. He glanced at the little girl who was seriously focused on drawing under the table lamp and didn't seem to notice his appearance at all. A faint smile flitted across his eyes. This little girl was indeed good-looking. Her thick eyelashes were like the feathers of a crow. When she didn't speak, she was elegant and beautiful with a lively temperament. Chapter 65. Yi Qian's drawing skills also surprised him. He only took a second glance at the knight, yet he was able to memorize the other party's face and draw it clearly. This was truly amazing. This portrait is of a man with a Hongkou accent. He has an injury, probably around his waist. When he got off the motorcycle, he consciously covered his right waist. Yi Qian handed the sketch to Yi Qian. There are 3 more. Give me a moment. Yi Qian, who had entered a state of concentration, had a cold look in his eyes. When he drew with the pencil, a cold light flashed across his eyes. I checked the wounded man's pistol. It was a QSZ-92 semi-automatic pistol with a total of 15 bullets. Only 1 shot was fired. If this bullet hit the man with a Hongkou accent, he should still be in the restaurant and won't leave for the time being. The Type QSZ-92 semi-automatic pistol used the Type DAP 92 9mm hard steel core ordinary bullet. The bullet had a low density and strong penetrative power. After penetrating a 1.3 mm thick helmet steel plate at a distance of 50 meters, it could still penetrate a 50 mm thick pine board. Other pistol bullets could not penetrate steel plate. Based on this, if the other party was really shot, what he had to do now was stop the bleeding and then move. Xia Jinyuan's sharp gaze was already scanning Yi Qian's face a few times. Then he raised his eyebrows and asked with a smile, "Looks like you learned a lot in the army. You even know this." "There are still 2 more portraits. Finish them in 4 minutes? Is that okay?" When he met her cold and calm gaze, Xia Jinyuan decided to use a coaxing and questioning tone to prevent this little girl from having any opinions about him. Young Master Xia, who had lived for 20 years, had always been the one being looked down upon. He never thought that in a small village he would have to look down upon a little girl. His cold tone softened, making Yi Qian a little uncomfortable. He raised his eyes to look at Xia Jinyuan, then indifferently retracted his gaze. "The other 4 are all side faces. Let me try to see if I can get their faces. Since they are the targets, don't you have any information on them? You don't even have a picture?" Her pencil didn't stop moving. She drew on the paper with rustling sounds, but targeted questions came one after another. "Although I don't know how you arranged it, alerting the target and letting your comrades get hurt is the mistake of the higher-ups." The rest of the paintings were still being painted. Xia Jinyuan, who was beside her, was still silent. If it wasn't for his strong aura, she would have thought that he had already left. "You're right, it was my mistake. In the end, there won't be a next time," Xia Jinyuan said coldly. Gradually, his voice became low. He took the portrait from the side and drew a portrait from the front. Xia Jinyuan looked at Yi Jian in surprise again. "Every time we meet, you always give me a surprise." Rolling up the workbook, Junyan looked at her with a solemn and cold expression. He warned, "Tonight might not be peaceful. Stay in the barracks and don't walk around." Yi Qian put down his pencil and stared at him. He frowned and said worriedly, "How did you get into the restaurant? Liao Jian's father is already there." "Don't worry, we will make arrangements. There won't be any more injuries to our comrades." Xia Jinyuan nodded slightly at Yi Qian. His tone was cold, firm, and solemn, as if he was making a promise. Chapter 66. His back was long and slender like bamboo, tall and straight like a pine tree. His steps were both incomparably elegant and as sharp as a sword. This was Xia Jinyuan, an elegant yet dangerous soldier. She pursed her lips slightly, stood up, and chased after him. "Captain Xia, I promised to go to my classmate's house tonight." Yi Qian, who had chased after him, turned around and disappeared around the corner of the stairs. She raised her voice and said, "I'm going out now. My classmate must be waiting for me at home." The footsteps downstairs did not stop, so Yi Qian had no choice but to chase after him again. She had to go out tonight. And Jiasen's mother was a doctor. If the target's gunshot wound needed to be stopped or treated, he would definitely look for Jiasen's mother and Auntie Zhou. If he ordered the soldiers in the barracks not to let her go out, she would definitely not be able to go out. The problem was it too late to find Auntie Zhou now? It had been 16 minutes since she found the target. Yi Qian, who could cross 3 or 4 steps in one step, quickly rushed from the 3rd floor to the 1st floor. She was fast, but not as fast as Xia Jinyuan. She could only hear his footsteps disappear on the 1st floor. Xia Jinyuan did not turn a deaf ear to her, but because he heard her, he needed to arrange for someone to escort her there. In order to save time, he did not stop to respond. Arrange for a sentry to escort Yi Jian to her classmates. Before he could finish his sentence, he heard the sound of footsteps behind him. Dong. It sounded like raindrops. How fast was this guy? Wasn't he afraid of tripping himself? Xia Jinyuan, whose face had turned cold, did not finish his order. He turned around and took a step forward. Standing at the bottom of the stairs, he looked up and saw a slender figure coming straight towards him like a swallow returning to the forest. Yi Qian, who had hurried down the stairs, did not expect him to suddenly appear. She reacted quickly and took a step back. Her right hand was firmly holding onto the stairs. Based on her calculations, she could have stopped and not bumped into him. However, according to what Xia Jinyuan saw, she would definitely fall down like a swallow returning to the forest. At the same time, she opened her arms and subconsciously walked up the stairs. Very steadily, she held Yi Qian tightly in her arms like a mountain. When the sentinel walked over, he saw another scene. The woman chased after him reluctantly. The man, who was also unwilling to part with her, felt the same way. He turned around and hugged the woman. It was a completely romantic scene. Soon, Xia Jinyuan realized how abrupt his actions were. He calmly retracted his hand and smiled at Yi Qian, who seemed to be frightened. Be careful next time. What you did just now could easily make people worry that you might get into an accident. The little girl was really thin. Her waist was so thin that he could wrap his arm around her waist. Yi Qian looked coldly at the man who calmly took a step back. He let out a long sigh and stopped himself from grinding his teeth. Looking at him, he said coldly, "I've already steadied myself. You made a mistake." In front of this girl, Xia Jinyuan felt that he was not very good with words. His thin lips curved into a helpless smile. When he turned around and looked at the sentinel again, his handsome face was cold, as if he had never smiled before. The sentinel's expression was a little strange. Xia Jinyuan glanced at him coldly and said in a deep voice, "What nonsense are you thinking? Escort her to her classmate's house. Be careful." Chapter 67. After instructing the sentinel, he turned his head to look at Yi Qian, who was still standing on the stairs with a cold expression on his face. He nodded apologetically, withdrew his deep gaze, and quickly left the dormitory. In the Spring Sun Hotel, Liao Yud, who was found on the card table, used a pair of scissors to cut open his bloody shirt. His expression immediately changed. Quick, go to the hospital and find a doctor. If this continues, it'll be bad." The black gunshot wound revealed flesh and blood. Small streams of blood could be seen seeping out of the wound that was the size of a child's pinky finger. A man carrying a steaming stainless steel pot quickly walked into the room. With a click, he locked the door and said to the pale Liao Yud, "Brother Da, it's up to you now." Inside the stainless steel pot were scissors and tweezers that had been disinfected with boiling water. Someone also took out gauze, bandages, anti-inflammatory drugs, and anesthetic needles from his bag. When Liao Yud heard this, his face turned even paler. He panicked and said, No, Brother Fei, I'm afraid you're injured somewhere. I can't use this bit of fur at all. It'll kill Brother Fei." Turning his head, he said to the man whose face was as pale as a sheet of paper due to excessive bleeding, "Brother Fei, I can't touch this man of yours. I'm going to find Dr. Zhou in the hospital now. She's treated gunshot wounds before." Even though the man called Brother Fei had a pale face, his expression was still fierce. When he heard this, his gaze darkened. He gave a look to the person beside him and nodded lightly in agreement. The small town, which did not have many nighttime activities, was already as dark as ink. Those who slept early had already turned off their lights and went to bed. Only a few scattered lights were still on. Yi Qian, who had already arrived at the town hospital, watched as the sentinel escorted him left. He then walked towards the doctor's office. When he reached the corridor, he heard Liao Jian's father, Liao Yud, say anxiously, "Dr. Zhou, hurry up." He drank too much and climbed a tree. Who would have thought that he would fall and be stabbed in the waist by a branch? Sigh, why did I get involved in this kind of thing? Yi Qian observed his surroundings. When he saw that no one was around, he quietly retreated. When she saw Liao Yud leading Dr. Zhou into the dark streets, she chased after them and imitated Jiasen's voice. "Mom, where are you going so late at night? I'll go with you." At first glance, it really made people think that it was Jiasen who had spoken. Yi Qian, who had caught up with them, accidentally bumped into Liao Yud, who was walking behind them. She seemed to have dropped something in her hands. She ran over and held Dr. Zhou's arm. "Didn't I tell you to rest at home?" Dr. Zhou, who was in a hurry to leave, did not notice it. Besides, Jiasen was indeed at home, so he did not think too much about it. Liao Yud rolled his eyes and laughed. "Jiasen is still up so late, and Liao Jianxing is still doing math. I know you're good at math, so why don't we go and teach Liao Jianxing together?" "Sure, no problem." The reason why he chased after her was because he was worried about Auntie Zhou. Naturally, Yi Qian agreed readily. Dr. Zhou still wanted to reprimand him, but his daughter tugged at his arm. It was only for a moment that he felt that there was something wrong with the daughter beside him. "Auntie, I'm Jiasen's classmate Yi Qian." Yi Qian's sharp senses felt her body stiffen. He held her arm and walked a few steps faster. He whispered, "Something happened? Just treat me as Jiasen." Chapter 68. Dr. Zhou still did not understand what was going on, but he started to feel uneasy. Liao Yud, who was behind him, stopped in his tracks. He reached into his pockets with both hands, as if he was looking for something. After touching his pockets, his expression changed. He whispered something to the man who followed him, then turned around and returned to the town hospital. "Let's go, Auntie." The corners of Yi Jian's lips curled up into a faint smile. Her dark eyes looked straight ahead. She was calm without a trace of fear. "Just treat me as Jiasen. Treat me as if I want to accompany you for a walk." Spring Sun Hotel was not far from the town hospital. After making a big turn, they could see Spring Sun Hotel at the entrance of the town from afar. It turned out that the lights in the hotel had suddenly gone out. Yi Qian could clearly feel the footsteps of the man who had been walking behind him quicken, but he quickly steadied himself. Spring Sun Hotel was not the only one without power. The entire town was without power. Spring Sun Hotel was a small two-story building. The back of the building was a field, and the front of the building was a road. The left and right sides of the building were empty. If they wanted to sneak in, they would have to turn off the lights to catch them. They had to turn off all the lights in the town to avoid suspicion. "Hurry up!" the strange man urged them in a hushed voice. The blackout in the town made the man slightly uneasy. Dr. Zhou did not say anything. He held Yi Qian's hand tightly and almost ran with the medical kit on his back. She wanted to find an opportunity to let Yi Qian run away alone. However, she heard Yi Qian humming a song. He was relaxed, as if he was taking a stroll on a summer night. He hummed until they were almost at Spring Sun Hotel. Then, the faint sound of night birds could be heard. That was Xia Jinyuan's belated response. He was telling Yi Qian that the surrounding area had been deployed. If Battalion Commander Yang had not told him that the person who sent the special communication method was Yi Qian, his response would have been even later. The faint smile on Yi Jian's face instantly disappeared. She reached out and grabbed Dr. Zhou's right shoulder. After grabbing the strap of the medical kit, she turned around and flashed past. She picked up the medical kit in her hand and threw it at the strange man's head. Everything happened so quickly that Dr. Zhou almost screamed. Before she could react, Yi Qian had already pulled her to squat in the dark. Once again, Yi Qian hummed a tune. This was the secret signal used by the troops to signal for the alarm to be lifted. Uncle Jen and Old Chen didn't teach this girl for nothing. A trace of a smile appeared on Battalion Commander Yang's cold and stiff face. He said appreciatively, "You're not careless at all when dealing with them." Xia Jinyuan, who was hiding in the dark, gently loosened his fists. He paused for a moment and said, "She came here with the doctor from the town. This girl is quite loyal. Commander Yang, I'll leave the outside to you." Yi Qian, that bold girl. She really dared. She didn't even consider that she was still a student. As Yi Qian responded to the call of the night birds, several black figures could be seen gliding through the night like cats. Two of them approached the entrance of the hotel. The other one walked to Yi Qian's side and directly dragged the man she had knocked out and disappeared into the night. One of the black figures approached Yi Qian. They were so close that they could feel each other's heat. The black figure asked softly, "Student Yi Qian, you're really disobedient. Are you born rebellious?" Chapter 69. He approached her stealthily. Yi Qian's hair stood on end. She was not used to this kind of close contact. A pair of big dry hands reached over. Yi Qian pursed her lips and ignored the distance between them. Her slender fingers touched his and started making hand gestures. "Do you understand?" He retracted his hand and asked softly. His breath was so close to her ear. His breath was light, and she could smell the faint scent of mint. Yi Qian, who was not used to it, held her breath slightly. She tilted her head to avoid the man's breath that she thought was invasive. She pulled Dr. Zhou, who was squatting with her, up and said softly, "Auntie, I'll go knock on the door. I'll have to trouble you later." "Okay, be careful." Dr. Zhou could only vaguely feel that there were more people around him. He could not see clearly in the dark, but he felt much more at ease. Yi Qian raised his hand and knocked on the door of the rolling casket. "Who asked my mother to come here for treatment? Where is she? Why is the door locked? There's no one here. Let's go." After he said that, he raised his voice and said, "Mom, let's go. Uncle, you drank too much and is teasing us." Footsteps came from the silent lobby. First, the glass door was opened. When the rolling casket door was pulled up, a man's figure appeared. "What's going on? Is there a patient or not?" Dr. Zhou, who smelled of alcohol, asked. "How are we going to see if there's a power outage? Where are the candles and flashlights?" When she spoke, Yi Qian had already walked into the hotel. "It's dark. Let's wait for Uncle Yu to buy some candles before we take a look." It seemed that she could not see clearly because it was too dark. She tripped over something and fell towards the man who was standing like a door guardian. The man, who was not prepared for what would happen to a young lady, was pushed out of the door by Yi Qian. As he cursed, the soldiers who were hidden on both sides quietly entered through the main door while Yi Qian apologized. Behind the house, another two soldiers leaped onto the second floor as if they were leaping onto the roof. Xia Jinyuan did not go in immediately. He hid in the dark and fixed his eyes on Yi Qian. He listened to her apology and heard her footsteps as she entered the restaurant. The moment the man turned around to bring Dr. Zhou in, Xia Jinyuan charged out like a cheetah. He raised his hand high and struck the back of the man's neck. "Auntie, don't panic." Yi Qian gently comforted Dr. Zhou, whose fingertips were cold. He held her hand and spoke calmly into the darkness. "Why didn't you light up a light? Where is the patient?" Xia Jinyuan, who came in later, suddenly heard a man's voice. "What are you shouting for? Wait a minute." This voice. He abruptly raised his head, and his dark eyes were filled with shock as he looked into the darkness. This voice was clearly the voice of the man he had struck unconscious. He was surprised, and so was Dr. Zhou. Footsteps could be heard from upstairs. Someone immediately said, "Brother Fei, get the doctor up here. And that young lady, Brother Yud, why don't you keep an eye on her?" This young lady insisted on following her mother. "Why don't they go up together? It's good that she's chatting with us." Liao Yud's voice came out of Yi Qian's mouth. In the dark, it made people shudder for no reason. Xia Jinyuan, who understood the situation, did not know whether to laugh or cry. No wonder this young lady was so bold. She was really skilled and daring. Chapter 70. With Yi Qian's words, Xia Jinyuan no longer had to hide his footsteps in the dark. He assumed the role of Liao Yud and hurriedly walked up the stairs. The man who was waiting for them did not suspect anything. He took out a lighter and was about to light the way for them when he said, "Doctor, take your things and watch your step." The lighter lit up for less than half a second. Xia Jinyuan, who was wearing combat gloves, reached out his hand at lightning speed to extinguish the light. At the same time, he quickly covered the other party's mouth. He stepped forward and slithered his left hand behind the man's head like a snake. After a muffled sound, the stairs returned to silence. The light flickered again. Yi Qian, who was waiting, saw Xia Jinyuan with a cold expression make a gesture to move forward. When the light went out, she held Dr. Zhou's hand and said softly, "Auntie, there's one last step." The last step was to rush into the room where Brother Fei was hiding and take control of the suspect. The second floor of Spring Sun Hotel was the accommodation. There were only 5 rooms in total. Xia Jinyuan received a report from the soldiers who had infiltrated the second floor. Several waiters had been taken control of, and the target's room was locked in the second room on the second floor. Yi Qian took the initiative to approach Xia Jinyuan, who was hiding against the wall. Just as she reached out her slender fingers, they were grabbed by his strong hand and a hand signal was sent over. Second floor, second room, 2 people. Yi Qian's voice changed to that of Anjiasen. She came up and complained, "If I knew this would happen, I would have brought a flashlight. Why didn't I light a candle when it's so dark?" Standing in the second room, she sounded even more dissatisfied. "Uncle Yud, where are you going?" "I brought you a flashlight. Why are you so nosy?" Liao Yud's voice rang out. Then, the sound of jogging footsteps gradually faded away. The soldiers who were hiding in the dark were stunned. Xia Jinyuan pursed his lips with a cold expression. He could not help but chuckle as Anjiasen talked about this person and that person. Her acting was indeed very convincing. Dr. Zhou wanted to laugh too, but he could not bring himself to do so at a time like this. He raised his hand and knocked on the door. "Do you want to see a doctor? You didn't even open the door?" He spoke with a town accent. "Of course. Otherwise, why would I ask you to come here?" This time, Yi Qian was imitating the voice of the man who had been killed by Xia Jinyuan. Inside, Brother Fei, who was lying on the bed, finally opened his mouth. "Light the candle and let the doctor in." There was finally a faint candlelight in the dark room. The candlelight illuminated a corner of the room, revealing Brother Fei's pale and weak face. He said to the man who was protecting him 24 hours a day, "Go and keep an eye on the doctor's daughter. Let the B** start bring the doctor in." He gnashed his teeth as he spoke, his eyes filled with ferocity. The moment the door opened, Yi Qian reacted quickly and pulled Dr. Zhou to the side, giving the front of the room to the soldiers who were ready to attack. Xia Jinyuan, who was standing in front of the door with a gaze as sharp as a sword, raised his right leg and kicked fiercely at the open door. After a loud bang, the wooden door flew into the room. The speed of the kick was fast and fierce. Yi Qian, who was pressed against the wall, felt a strong gust of wind blow past his face. He felt a slight pain. Chapter 71. Dr. Zhou leaned against the wall with his back drenched in cold sweat as he shouted, "Don't move!" He slowly sat down on the cold floor. Wind blew out from the room without a door. Yi Qian, who had just heaved a sigh of relief, froze. How could the night wind blow out from the room with the windows tightly shut? She seemed to have thought of something and suddenly shouted, "Xia Jinyuan! Downstairs!" She dashed out of the room like an arrow. She was so fast that Xia Jinyuan did not even have a chance to speak. He pressed down on his headset and listened to the report from his comrades behind the house. As he chased after Yi Qian, he ordered in a deep voice, "Take control of the target and escort her away overnight. Battalion Commander Yang, notify the Power Supply Bureau to restore the electricity." Less than 10 seconds after he gave the order, the lights flickered briefly and the electricity supply in Fujian town was restored. Xia Jinyuan, who had chased her all the way to the restaurant lobby, slowly stopped under the bright lights. He quietly looked at the slender figure standing at the entrance of the restaurant. After a while, he slowly walked over and said with a smile, "Weren't you very powerful just now? Why do I feel like you're disappointed?" "Sigh, a little girl will always be a little girl. She may be good, but she's still a child." Her little face was just like the weather in June. It could change at any moment. He chased her to the first floor. Yi Qian could already tell whose footsteps it was. After a moment of silence, She sighed softly and looked up at him with her bright black eyes. I see the difference between us. The difference between us. How old am I? How old are you? Xia Jinyuan, who was choked by her words, suddenly burst into laughter. He looked at her serious face and could only stop laughing. He coughed dryly and comforted her. You're already very good. Your ventriloquism stunned my comrades. How old am I? You'll be scared to death if I tell you. Yi Qian pursed his lips as he looked at Xia Jinyuan, who had suddenly become an understanding soldier. His eyes flickered before a smile slowly appeared on his beautiful face. It's not a matter of age. It's related to the environment. No matter what she had learned, she was still one step behind since she had never received a systematic command education. That was why she panicked when she saw her target jump out of the window. Who was Xia Jinyuan? How could he not have made arrangements? It has something to do with the environment? Xia Jinyuan raised his eyebrows and thought for a while before nodding. He smiled and looked at the little girl in front of him who was very good at reflecting on her shortcomings. He answered her seriously, it does have something to do with the environment, but in the end, it still depends on one's hard work. Now that you have a first-grade sergeant major and a world-class sniper to nurture you, your environment is already better than many people in this world. They created the environment, and you have to work harder. As he spoke, his voice suddenly became very serious. They have put a lot of effort into you, so you have to cherish it. Also, I have to remind you that if you want to become a soldier, you have to first understand the meaning of obedience. He was going to settle scores with her. Yi Qian quietly took a step outside. He had only taken one step when Xia Jinyuan grabbed his arm. Are you trying to slip away? Chapter 72. Her attitude of admitting her mistake was good, but it was useless in front of him. You ran down in such a hurry because you were worried that the target would escape. I can understand your intentions. Xia Jinyuan curled up the corners of his mouth and looked at the girl in front of him, who had a pair of starry eyes. His faint smile had a hint of banter. Your attitude of admitting your mistake is also very good. Are you afraid that I will scold you? What am I afraid of? I'm not your soldier. Yi Qian, who had a cold gaze, smiled and said, besides, I did go to look for my classmate. I just happened to run into Auntie Zhou. So what if she ran down? He had already set up an inescapable trap. There was no way he would let Brother Fei escape by jumping out of the window. He was just overreacting. Her answer made Xia Jinyuan raise his eyebrows. Then, there was a hint of calmness in his dark and cold eyes. Looking at her, his smile faded a little and he said calmly, if you were my soldier, Yi Qin, you would end up in a miserable state. There is a rule in military law that states that soldiers who disobey orders and act willfully will be punished with a warning, a serious warning, a demerit, or a major demerit depending on the severity of the situation. At the mention of military law, his expression inevitably became stern. After he finished speaking, Xia Jinyuan, who had been paying attention to Yi Qian's expression, slowly smiled again. So, Yi Qian, if you want to become a qualified soldier, obeying orders is the first thing you need to learn. When he smiled, he looked even more handsome and elegant. His cold temperament also gained the elegance of a noble young master when he smiled. He was a man who could not hide his nobility even though he was wearing a military uniform. How could he have grown up in an ordinary environment? Every place had its own people. That was why the environment was so important. Thank you for your advice. I understand. Yi Qian nodded gently and took his advice to heart. A soldier's duty is to obey orders. Headmaster Chen and Grandpa Zhen had both personally said this before. However, she had placed her focus on improving her own abilities and had forgotten about this most basic awareness that she should have. The sound of footsteps could be heard. It was the soldiers upstairs. Reporting, the second floor has been cleared. Inform the police to seal off the scene. His smile faded, and a cold expression appeared between his elegant brows. He turned around, and his straight back already carried the piercingly cold aura of a soldier. Gather, withdraw. Yi Qian looked over his shoulder and saw that the soldier standing in front of him had a cold expression on his face. From his serious and meticulous attitude, he could tell that he was absolutely obedient to Xia Jinyuan's orders. Yi Qian pursed his lips slightly. A soldier's duty was to obey orders. Perhaps she understood. Yi Qian's eyes narrowed as he looked at his towering figure. A man like him would not only be able to convince his soldiers with his abilities, but he would also be able to convince his soldiers in all aspects. After everything was arranged, Xia Jinyuan let Yi Qian and Dr. Zhou out of the restaurant. Chapter 73. Dr. Zhou was slightly older than the rest. She hurriedly said, "Don't worry, we will keep this matter to ourselves and will not spread it. You are a doctor and have the noble professional ethics of a doctor. We naturally believe in Dr. Zhou." Xia Jinyuan said gracefully. In front of the people, his attitude was not as cold as steel, but as gentle as a breeze. "I won't see you too often. Once again, I'm very sorry." Xia Jinyuan arranged for a soldier to send Dr. Zhou away first. After she walked further away, he suddenly raised his hand and flicked Yi Qian's forehead lightly. "I didn't have time to praise you just now. You did well, little girl. You really flicked me." Yi Qian was caught off guard and was flicked directly. She held her aching forehead and there was a slight ripple in her indifferent eyes. "This is nothing. One moment you praise me, the next moment you punish me." Xia Jinyuan was already laughing. He was a man who was very good at restraining himself. Even if he was happy, his laughter was low and shallow, and it was refreshing in the night. "You are only 14, not 40. Relax, don't show too much indifference in your eyes. 14 years old is the rainy season. I'm guessing that Captain Xia's 14 years old is not the rainy season either. There is no indifference in his eyes, but at least he looks unattainable." Facing the unpredictable Major, Yi Jian decided to give him a taste of his own medicine. Would a 20-year-old Major live a 14-year-old life like a blooming and rainy season? Was it possible? Thinking about his 14 years old, Xia Jinyuan tactfully kept his mouth shut. The girl in front of him was really smart. It was better for him to say less, in case she made him feel angina. He waved at the soldier who was waiting for his orders. Come. Send this student back to the recruit assembly camp." He was only 14 years old. No wonder Old Master Xia and Old Master Xia said he was difficult to deal with every day. The 20-year-old himself met the 14-year-old Yi Qian, who was also a difficult girl to deal with. Sigh, he suddenly wanted to call back to ask about Old Master Xia and apologize. Xia Jinyuan made a phone call to Beijing after they got into the car that escorted the suspects back to the city. In the heavily guarded military compound, in a quaint military compound covered with creepers outside, a guard picked up the phone. After greeting him, he trotted upstairs and gently knocked on the door. "Commander-in-Chief, the Major called and said that he has something urgent to report to you." At 10:30 in the evening, Commander-in-Chief Xia, who had always been on time, jumped out of bed when he heard the call. This guy had never taken the initiative to call. Could it be that something had happened to him in the team? What happened? As soon as he opened his mouth, he suddenly heard the words, "Old man, I'm sorry. I suddenly feel that being 14 years old really makes people worry." Commander-in-Chief Xia had the urge to smash the phone. It turned out that he had been worried for nothing. "Brat, just you wait. Old man, send my regards to Old Master Xia. Also, good night." Xia Jinyuan smiled and hung up the phone. Commander-in-Chief Xia was in good health and full of energy. Brat, can't sleep in the middle of the night? It seemed that he had to make a call and increase his workload. He was always so frivolous. Chapter 74. Xia Jinyuan had always been difficult to deal with. When he was young, he would ask all sorts of questions, and when he grew up, he would still ask all sorts of questions. It was fine if he asked, but he would always ask questions that were difficult to answer. In the eyes of everyone in the family Xia, Xia Jinyuan was the little demon king of family Xia. However, This little demon king was admitted to the military academy in one go and had performed meritorious deeds several times. He became a major at the age of 20, becoming the youngest major in the family. With such a promising son, Commander-in-Chief Xia could be said to have swept away his previous dispiritedness. When Xia Jinyuan was 14 years old, he had always been proud and elated. This was why, even if he was startled by Xia Jinyuan's inexplicable phone call, he would not be angry. Contact Political Commissar Zhang of the Nanguang military region. Commander-in-Chief Xia turned around, went into his room, put on his military jacket, and then went to the study. The troops deep in the mountains of Fujian town belonged to the Nanguang military region. The night grew darker, and in the latter half of the night, fog began to appear. Standing in front of the window, Yi Jian, who didn't know how long it had been, suddenly felt that her body was wet. Only then did she wake up from her contemplation. When she looked up, she realized that there was a faint line of gray on the distant horizon. It was already 5 o'clock in the morning. Yi Jian, who had not slept the entire night, did not feel sleepy at all. She quickly washed her face and rinsed her mouth with the sound of the military horn at the recruit assembly camp. 2 minutes later, Yi Jian, who had packed up her textbooks, appeared in the canteen on time. Here, Yi Jian only needed to help the cooking squad wash the vegetables and clean up the place. A week's worth of breakfast and dinner would be ready. Yi Jian, who had been here for half a month, was nimble, diligent, and able to endure hardships. All the soldiers in the recruit assembly camp knew her. Morning. Morning. You're up so early? Come on, the pickled vegetable buns just came out of the pot. There are also eggs and steamed buns. Whatever you want to eat, go get it yourself. The leader of the cooking squad was from the northeast. When he saw Yi Jian come in, he happily told her to eat more. The soldiers in the class all agreed that Yi Jian had lost a lot of weight and was much shorter. If he ate more noodles, he would grow taller and fatter. Yi Jian didn't know if it was because he had been eating well for the past half a month, but he really did feel that he had grown a lot taller. After greeting them with a smile, he ate his breakfast and cleaned up the kitchen. She tidied up the kitchen, tidied up the room, and left for school at 6:30. She liked to jog to school. While exercising, she could also strengthen her body. Gao Yang, who was riding his bicycle, once again saw the figure running along the national highway. After a slight hesitation on his cold and handsome face, the corners of his lips tightened a little, and he pedaled his bicycle to catch up. He rode directly in front of Yi Jian and slammed on the brakes. His hands gripped the steering wheel of the bicycle handsomely, and with a twist, he and the bicycle stopped in front of Yi Jian. This series of actions was completed very quickly. He didn't consider whether others would be frightened. He suddenly stopped in front of Yi Jian, who was jogging. Yi Jian's reaction was a little more valiant. In addition to what had happened last night, his subconscious reaction was, he lifted his leg and viciously kicked the bicycle in the middle. Gao Yang didn't expect to be met with a direct kick. He stared blankly as Yi Jian, who had a cold and ruthless expression, kicked out like lightning. She didn't hesitate at all and kicked directly. Clang, bang. Gao Yang, who had been kicked down with his bicycle, didn't regain his senses for a while. Chapter 75. What am I doing? Yi Jian didn't look apologetic at all. He calmly retracted his left leg and smiled. I should be the one asking you what you're doing. If I didn't react quickly, I would be the one lying on the ground right now. Yi Jian didn't like anyone who had anything to do with Yi Ying. Moreover, this Gao Yang was a bit too full of himself. Gao Yang, who was in a sorry state, got up in a rage out of humiliation. As he patted the dust off his body, he faintly sucked in a breath of cold air. He rolled up his sleeves and saw that his elbow was scraped and bleeding. Seeing the wound, he angrily looked up and glared at Yi Jian. You're really, I'm really what? Yi Jian calmly interrupted him. You think I didn't kick you hard enough? The faint disgust in her tone caused Gao Yang's face to turn even more ashen and ugly. When his gaze met Yi Jian's ice-cold and emotionless black eyes, his heart turned slightly cold. However, he did not say anything else. His lips were pursed into a straight line. He lifted his bicycle and asked as if he was giving alms, "Where did Yi Ying go during the May Day holiday? I went to your Shuku village, but I couldn't find her." What did Yi Qian hate the most? People like him the most. As if you should be grateful and honored that he was willing to talk to you. With a cold laugh, Yi Qian didn't look at him anymore and walked over. "You're being unreasonable." Yi Qian, stop right there. Gao Yang wanted to ask her something, but when he saw her ignoring him, he suppressed his anger and pushed the bicycle with his left hand and reached out with his right hand to grab Yi Qian's arm. Yi Qian's cold expression had completely turned cold when he chased after him again. Seeing that he still dared to reach out to grab him, a cold glint flashed in his dark eyes. It seemed that he hadn't kicked him enough just now. He didn't learn his lesson. Her patience was running out. She narrowed her eyes and her face was cold. The moment she turned around, she grabbed Gao Yang's right hand with one hand and twisted it forcefully. This boy, who was considered the most handsome boy in school, was in so much pain that he cried out involuntarily. "My patience has always been limited. You've done it again and again. Gao Yang, do you think I'm a pushover who can be easily bullied?" He increased the strength of his hand, and the muscles in his arm could be seen twisting outwards. Gao Yang was already in so much pain that his back was drenched in cold sweat. However, his arrogance was not reduced in the slightest. He shouted coldly, "Let go of me, Yi Qian." "Apologize." The corners of Yi Qian's lips curled up coldly. She grabbed his wrist with one hand and grabbed his shoulder with the other. "Removing your arm is just a small matter to me." Her expression was exceptionally cold. Even her eyes seemed to have a metallic glint to them. Her calm tone made it clear that she wasn't joking. Gao Yang's heart froze. He immediately realized that every word she said was absolutely true. She wasn't joking. "I apologize." With this realization, no matter how angry Gao Yang was, he could only apologize honestly. "I'm very sorry. I offended you. Please forgive me." Yi Qian chuckled softly and slowly released his hands. She raised her eyebrows and the coldness in her expression disappeared. She said lazily, "At least you know what's good for you. Let me remind you, Mr. Gao. In the future, you shouldn't ask me about Yi Ying in front of me. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that I won't do anything to make you unhappy. Also, Yi Ying and I don't walk the same path. I don't want to have anything to do with her." After she finished speaking, she picked up her backpack and leisurely jogged again as if nothing had happened. Chapter 76. Fujian town was surrounded by mountains. Although it was poor, the scenery was picturesque. Every morning, Yi Qian would jog along the national highway and look at the mountains and rivers. He always felt exceptionally calm. Even Gao Yang's incident did not affect his mood. Yi Qian's hair was wet from the fog. When he entered the classroom, he saw Liao Jian, who was always late, sitting in the classroom. He was not as noisy as he usually was. He was so quiet that he looked gloomy. When he heard the footsteps of a classmate coming in, his gloomy eyes faintly lit up as he looked up. When he saw that it was Yi Jian, that glimmer of light disappeared in an instant like sparks. He stood up and looked behind Yi Qian. Yi Qian immediately knew what he was doing. He was waiting for Yi Ying to come over. His father was arrested, so he was afraid, uneasy, and anxious. It was normal for him to be anxious to find someone who could help him. Moreover, Yi Ying's father was the deputy mayor. It was normal for him to look for her. He was the one who was not normal. Since when was his relationship with Yi Ying so good that he could look for her? "I have good news for you." Yi Qian calmly looked away as his classmate waved at him. He walked over with a smile. "What good news? Why are you so excited so early in the morning?" The ones who arrived early were always the few who were good at studying. The top scorer in the liberal arts and science class were both present. The top scorer in the liberal arts, Zhang Na, did not wait for Yi Qian to sit down and said excitedly, "The competition for the provincial experimental high school. Which subject did you sign up for? Mathematics? Language, physics, chemistry? Oh, and English. This is an extra point competition. All second and third graders in the province can participate. Next Saturday, the teachers will come to our school. We'll sign up later. The top science student, Zhou Liao, was also excited. He had an extraordinary passion for mathematics. This time, he signed up for the competition. Zhang Na glanced at him, then looked at Yi Qian. Her eyes twinkled. She smiled and said, "Then Yi Qian, you're choosing physics? Chemistry? Anyway, you did pretty well in the physics exams these 2 times." Her words immediately put a lot of pressure on the male students who were interested in signing up for the chemistry Olympiad. Yi Qian's Chinese is pretty good too. In less than a month, Yi Qian had already made the top students in the class feel the pressure of competition. The top 3 in this competition would all get bonus points, which would be a great advantage for entering the Provincial Experimental No. 1 Middle School. Yi Jian looked up from the competition registration list and said with a smile, "Give me the pen." Yi Jian smiled and said, "Give me the pen." He bent down and looked at the application column. A string of beautiful English words that could be used as advertisements appeared on the application form. When Zhang Na saw it, she said in shock, "English? English? Would this work? We only learned English in the first year of junior high. Let's register for English first." There are instructions here that a candidate can register for multiple subjects at the same time. All the exams are not done in one go, but in batches. Yi Qian smiled and put down his pen. He looked calm and confident. "You guys go first. I'll follow," she said with a smile. The meaning behind her words made the faces of the top students somewhat awkward. Zhou Liao frowned and looked at Zhang Na. He said in a deep voice, "The exam is based on ability. Without Yi Qian, are you sure you can get into the top 3? He then looked at Yi Qian, who was backing down for his classmates, and said sternly, "Don't worry about anything. It's based on ability." Zhang Na was about to cry. Yi Qian patted her on the shoulder and smiled. "Really, there aren't many people who want to register for English. Let's give it a try first. If it doesn't work, we'll take another test." Chapter 77. I'm not bad myself, so what's there to be afraid of? Yi Qian took his registration form and returned to his seat. He filled in all the subjects except Chinese. He could definitely participate in more of these competitions, especially since his goal was to get into the Provincial Experimental High School. There were still 10 minutes before the morning self-study session. Liao Jian, who had been fidgeting, suddenly stood up and rushed over, making the tables and chairs squeak. Yi Ying appeared at the classroom door. If Liao Jian hadn't made the tables and chairs squeak, Yi Qian wouldn't have looked up from his politics textbook. The two met at the classroom door and saw a flash of panic in Yi Ying's eyes. She pursed her lips and said, "Go outside." She immediately turned and left the classroom, as if afraid that someone would see her. Yi Ying's expression was much easier to read compared to her previous life when she became a government official's wife. Yi Qian's lips were slightly pursed. In his previous life, he graduated from junior high school, but Yi Ying studied in America and became the pride of Fujian Town. So much so that when he ran back to Fujian Town, he had no choice but to leave and survive cautiously. The biggest turning point of his life had passed. Then, let's see who will be king in the future. Who will be the bandit? What are they doing sneaking around? Since when can a bad student and a good student walk together? And Jiasun, who happened to bump into Zhang Bin, sat down on his seat and said in a low voice, "I even saw Liao Jian grab Yi Ying's wrist." He seemed to be very excited. Yi Qian also felt that the two were sneaking around, but this wasn't what she was concerned about. "Why do you care? Have you filled in the form? The Provincial Experimental High School has a competition for bonus points for the high school entrance exam. Hurry up and talk to Zhou Liao and the others." Yi Qian said without looking up from his book. He had flipped from the first page to the 11th page. And Jiasun sat up for less than 2 minutes and had already flipped to another page. And Jiasun looked at her as she casually flipped through a page. Her gaze swept from the top to the bottom. Occasionally, she paused for a moment before flipping the page again. And Jiasun looked at her suspiciously. "Are you killing time?" Even if she were to read books and memorize books, she wouldn't be able to do that. She would only pause on a page for a few minutes. You shouldn't spend your time like this. Let's review. Yiqian glanced at her with a smile. He didn't explain anything and only said, "You finished memorizing everything? The last few chapters of the Constitution are a little difficult to memorize. If you haven't memorized them, I suggest you memorize them a few more times. Who knows, you might pass this time." And Jiasun was a top student in mathematics, so she was not interested in liberal arts. Hearing this, he yawned and stood up lazily. No. Also, it's not a good thing for Ying to be close to Liao Jian. You should be careful. Ying had always targeted Yiqian, and a few weeks ago, Yiqian had even embarrassed the narrow-minded Liao Jian. Now that the two of them had walked to the side, it was better to be careful. I know, don't worry. Yiqian smiled disapprovingly and ended the conversation when the self-study class bell rang. In the city detention center, Xia Jinyuan received the report from the police. His gaze fell on one of Liao Yud's statements. After a long pause, his handsome face darkened as he asked, "How true is it?" Chapter 78. Xia Jinyuan waved the statement in his hand and pursed his thin lips. His voice had already deepened. I need to make a copy of this statement. Don't inform the local police station about the missing pistol for now. Wait for my news. Liao Yud mentioned that the pistol was still with him when he went to the town hospital to look for Dr. Zhou. However, the pistol was accidentally dropped when he was at the Spring Sun Hotel. There was another important point, and Jiasun bumped into him when she ran over. That night, Yiqian was the one who used her ventriloquism to play the roles. In other words, she was the one who bumped into Liao Yud. This little girl. It seemed that he had to go back and look for her. The Municipal Public Security Bureau agreed to Xia Jinyuan's request, but he had to give a reply within 24 hours. After all, the loss of a pistol with 15 bullets was a big deal. After leaving the Public Security Bureau, Xia Jinyuan drove the military jeep back to Fujian town. At an intersection waiting for a red light, he inadvertently looked at the opposite side. Jun Yen, who had always been cold, smiled slightly, then turned around and parked the car on the opposite side of the road. Less than 10 minutes after getting out of the car, he walked out of the building with a bag and returned to Fujian town. At this moment, Yiqian was standing in the teacher's office. Her gaze was cold as she looked at her homeroom teacher. After she said a bunch of nonsense, she smiled and said, "Teacher Ku, don't worry. Although I'm young, I know how to act according to my ability. Since I've applied, I'm confident that I'll pass. You're my teacher, shouldn't you have more confidence in me?" Teacher Ku snorted when she submitted the competition form from the Provincial Experimental High School. Faced with her calm reply, Teacher Ku, who was about to vomit blood, said coldly, "Physics, chemistry, mathematics, and English. Do you think you're a genius? Apply for everything. It's fine if you embarrass yourself in school, but don't embarrass yourself outside." To Teacher Ku, Yiqian was like a fish bone stuck in her throat. She couldn't spit it out or swallow it down. She had to face it every day and felt terrible every day. "I'm the one losing face. What does it have to do with you?" Yiqian spoke and smiled. Ming Yan's dimples were even calmer and gentlemanly than a teacher's. Her bright eyes were smiling as she gazed at her own teacher. Her attitude, which was neither servile nor overbearing, made the other teachers have a good impression of her. Yiqian had originally thought that as long as he could get into the top 3 in one subject, the rest of the competition would just be for fun. Now that Teacher Ku was deliberately making things difficult for him, he smiled faintly and made up his mind. If he wanted to take the exam, he would do it to his heart's content. She really liked face-slapping now. Mr. Ku threw the registration form into the drawer and snorted with a straight face. "You've never listened to my advice. You're so arrogant that you're throwing your face outside. What else can I say?" Hearing what she said, they all laughed and said, "Teacher Ku, if there is such a student in my class who dares to rush forward, I will burn incense every day. You must be happy in your heart." That's right. It's a good thing that students are motivated. As teachers, we have to support them. If they really do well in the exam, won't they bring glory to you and the school? Her colleague's words made teacher Ke feel even more bitter. If it were any other student, she would be happy. However, it couldn't be Yi Jian. Chapter 79. However, Yi Jian was not affected by her at all. He carried his backpack and walked out of the school gates leisurely. Just as he was about to jog back to the recruit camp like he always did, he heard the sound of a car horn. This was also the signal used by the soldiers when they were driving. Others did not know, but when she heard it again, she immediately looked over. "Get in." Xia Jinyuan stuck his head out of the car window and waved at Yi Jian, who had stopped in his tracks. "Why are you still standing there? I'll send you back." "Little girl, you even know about the automobile soldiers. Don't tell me you've learned all the ways to contact each other in the army?" Yi Jian instinctively wanted to reject this elegant yet dangerous man, but when she saw his half-smile, as if he knew everything, she sighed softly and walked over with a natural expression. She opened the door to the front passenger seat and got into the car with a light step. When she smiled at him, her expression was open and honest. This made Xia Jinyuan laugh. "You really don't know, or are you pretending not to know? Or are you deliberately pretending not to know? This little girl is so calm. I don't believe that she doesn't know why I'm here. I don't know. Since Captain Xia specially came to look for me, it must be something important." Yi Jian curved his lips and revealed a faint smile. "If Captain Xia didn't tell me, then I really wouldn't know." His thin lips were originally just a faint smile, but this time, his smile deepened. His handsome face was as clear as the moon as he said lazily, "Student Yi Jian, your attitude is very bad. You're asking the obvious. I think that there are some things that only one needs to know. I don't need to guess what others think." Yi Jian smiled faintly. Even under the cold military aura, he was calm and composed. "If the enemy doesn't move, I won't move. Isn't this the law of war?" In just one night, this little girl had improved too quickly. She even knew how to talk to him about the law of war. Xia Jinyuan smiled and glanced at her as he drove. "Where did you put it? This thing is dangerous. Moreover, you are not qualified to control it now, and you do not have the qualifications to own it. Although your intentions are good, it's better to leave it to us for safekeeping. It's in the dormitory. I didn't bring it." Since he had already put it this way, there was no need for her to pretend to be deaf and mute. She generously admitted, "I didn't touch it. I kept it well and waited for you to come and get it." He was right. Without a proper identity, it would be futile even if he possessed her. Uncle Zhen and Principal Chen had taught her well, but she was not someone who would willingly break the law. Moreover, she really didn't care about that gun. He returned to the dormitory and took out a pistol from the bottom of the shoe cabinet. He returned in less than 3 minutes. The car was parked outside. It turned out that Xia Jinyuan, who was sitting in the car, was talking to Principal Chen. Under the setting sun, the tall and handsome man smiled slightly. He nodded slightly to Principal Chen, who had said something, and said, "Then we'll be back tomorrow afternoon." Welcome to Legends of Cultivation audiobooks, where we bring ancient fantasy to life through storytelling. Follow the rise of heroes who defy fate, unlock mystical powers, and battle across celestial realms. Our audiobooks are crafted for fans of Chinese cultivation novels, filled with battles, breakthroughs, and legendary artifacts. Subscribe and be part of an unforgettable journey into the realm of immortality.